Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar with Link Squares. Welcome if you're new. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today, we're talking about a topic that hopefully resonates with all of you and is the reason you're all here today. We know legal professionals are no strangers to busy days, an influx of requests, tasks, questions that come in. But hopefully, we're here to really help flip that script. We know without the right tools, much of your effort can kind of feel like you're treading water, maybe exerting energy where it might not be necessary, and not being able to get ahead. So we want to demonstrate today how adding in tech solutions and optimizing your efficiency can transform your entire workflow and allow you to focus on what really matters, which is helping the business and making sure that you have time for yourself as well. And make sure you stick around to the end. We will be diving into a topic that everyone loves, which is AI. So stay tuned for that. With that, I'm Mary. I manage our growth marketing team here at Link Squares. So I get to join these webinars and kind of crash the party from time to time. So thank you all for being here. I'll pass it to Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Adams. I'm the Director of Legal Operations at Contentful and happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I will pass it to Ashlyn.
Hi, my name is Ashlyn Donahue, and I am the Director of Legal here at LinksFirst.
Fantastic. Thank you both. One question that I have for each of you before we really dive in is how do you define legal operations in your current role? Ashley, we'll start with you.
So, in my current role, I would say legal operations is a little bit of everything. So, I touch quite a bit, probably more so than I have in other roles. So, I would say it is about running the business of legal, but also supporting my chief legal officer from, I would say, a more chief of staff type perspective. I'm running our meetings and I'm heavily involved in our financials, our headcount planning, you name it. And sometimes it lands on my desk, which is great. No day is the same, which that makes it so much fun.
Ashlyn, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Mary, as you know, in my role as Director of Legal, and really for everyone on our team, we really have dual hats. We are supporting legal or operations functions, but also negotiating contracts or supporting privacy or marketing items that might come in. And so for me, when I think about legal operations and the focus and priority that we have in that space, is really about scale and leaning into how we can scale alongside a fast growing business through efficiency opportunities that we might identify throughout processes or systems or other aspects of our day-to-day responsibilities.
Definitely. So, you know, we know that legal ops means different things in every organization, as you both demonstrated. So, with that, we really want to give a framework of how to kind of help ease maybe some of balancing your workload or just helping ease those challenges that maybe your legal ops team currently faces. Ashlyn, let's walk through these frameworks, maybe starting with that prioritizing initiatives piece.
Yeah, so, I always like to think about exactly what it is we're going to tackle and why. Ruthless prioritization. Um, there is a never-ending list of maybe one days that you're going to want to tackle, and that is fantastic. The opportunities on the horizon are never ending. That being said, you can't do it all, and if you do, you're not only going to get burnt out, but I find that the output that you are providing to your team and to the larger business is, sometimes of less quality or more rushed, less impact. So really thinking about what are those business objectives, what is going to have the most positive outcome to the business, and making sure that you're identifying those opportunities that really align with that and prioritizing those and not being afraid to say, hey, we're not going to do this item that you're requesting. And here's why. We have these other items on the list that are really high impact to this business objective that is key for this year, and giving that context. And so having that dual, yes and no mindset.
Ashley, what about for
Um,
you?
I find that other functions do this sometimes much better than we do in legal. I'll pick on my dear friends in IT. I love them, but they have a really good way of fiercely prioritizing the work that comes into their queue and being very adamant about, no, this is below the line and this is why. And so I think adopting some of that methodology into what we do to prioritize the initiatives could really benefit us greatly. And also asking ourselves the question of, does this align not only to the business objectives, but does it align to the overall like goals of the company and the vision, and asking that question constantly of, when something comes in our door, how does that line up to these other things? And sometimes that's a good way and an easier way to say no.
Absolutely. What about the optimizing and automation piece, Ashlyn?
Yeah, so really, when I think about optimizing for legal efficiency, you could kind of take this into two different threads. One is really building those foundational building blocks on which your legal team is going to grow and scale. Legal support never changes. It never ends, really, right? As your business grows, what they're doing is more complex, more complicated. You have more business partners. You're being asked to, take on responsibilities or support tasks in competing, areas. And so really thinking about how are you going to elevate your legal team to meet the business where they're at in their growth stage without just hiring new folks every step along the way to do that. And it's taking that lens of scale and optimizing the way you're operating and relaying that to your team and creating those building blocks for your team, but also for your business partners. There is a lot of opportunity out there for you to empower them and enable them to perform something self-service or have the information they need without having to get in touch with someone from legal directly. And so really thinking about that, I think is fantastic, and systems definitely play a big role in that.
Absolutely. And what about providing visibility? Ashley, let's start with you. Is there a specific way that provide more visibility to the organization, to your legal team as a whole? How do you kind of tackle that?
So I think for us, the biggest way to provide visibility is to make the data available. Um, Let the numbers speak for themselves. And we've worked probably over the last year and a half or so to build our data lake, if you will, of information, the reports that we want to see, and we're constantly taking a look at that. The other thing that we do, which I know a lot of other legal teams have, is a ticketing system. And so that is our front door into our team. And all of the activities that occur happen in that ticket. And so you have full visibility at all times as to what's happening. If I'm a business stakeholder, I'm requesting something of legal, I can go back to that ticket and see, oh, well, they've asked me for something. I didn't go do that. Let me go do that. And I think being very transparent in the why. Here it is. Here's the information, and we're going to put it out there and let it speak for itself.
I
Definitely.
couldn't agree
Ashlyn,
more on that, the transparency and the why. I think that's so crucial. And I think that providing visibility and from a data perspective, I love data, rules everything. I'm always asking everyone else to bring data to the table. I always want to be able to bring it myself when we're having conversations. But I think that centralization and streamlining of workflows provides a different level of visibility at times as well, where folks are really enabled and empowered to see what those who came before them were responding with. And it starts to breed consistency and support, identifies where you have opportunities to document things for playbooking. I really just truly believe that through reporting, through data, through centralizations and systems, you can really take your legal team to the next step in a much more efficient and targeted way.
fantastic. So as we go throughout this webinar, we'll actually be focusing mainly on that optimizing for legal efficiency piece. So just keep that in mind as we walk through. Before moving on, I just wanted to talk about this quote quickly. I said it was cheesy, but Ashley assured me it's not. This really does ring true for legal professionals who might find themselves, bogged down in repetitive tasks or routine tasks day in and day out. And really breaking free from that cycle will help everyone embrace, the technology that will help revolutionize and really help you be more operationally efficient. Um, so with that, let's talk about our first tip. Again, streamlining those routine tasks throughout automation saves time, helps reduce costs. But how can we really, use data for all of those pieces? Ashlyn, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that data really is an opportunity for you to drill down and make actionable recommendations, whether that's to your internal legal department as to areas that they have opportunities to create operational efficiency, or your business teams. And I remember when was talking to someone a couple months ago about wanting to be able to like literally pull all of the data, like every single data field in like a massive data dump. And they were kind of pressure testing, like, well, why? Like, why do you want that? And I think for me, having the ability to drill down even layers deep within the data that I'm looking at on a day-to-day basis at a couple junctures throughout the year provides me with so much clarity and visibility to how we're operating, what we're doing, and how to have better conversations with our business partners. It shifts the narrative, it shifts the focus. A really great example is, I spent quite a bit of time looking at data, at deep diving in data, categorizing it, and looking at it through the lens of our sales cycle and our pre-sale cycle. And it provided me with enough information to go back and have a really strong conversation with our VP of sales about a couple of areas where we had opportunities to improve our NDA process and what we could do to maybe optimize that workflow. Without that level of insight, it's just a little finger to the wind, like, hey, it feels like maybe something's amiss. Um, and I could never have gotten that information without tech. I mean, I've done it in Google Sheets, but it's not fun.
Ashley, what about for you?
So I think for me, obviously I mentioned we have a ticketing system and that being the front door. And I'll go to kind of the example of creating resourcing and headcount plans using data. Um, I can take the information that I gain from that ticketing system to say, okay, my compliance team, they're getting an influx of requests for X, Y, and Z. And the level of complexity to that request is really high. And I know that that's a 3-person team, for example. Should I, over time, take a look at those trends? Is there a point in time, for example, is it seasonal? So is it July where all of a sudden these requests come in? Should I consider an alternative legal service to come in and help support? Or is it enough to where that trend is continuing, where I can say, yeah, here's the data, here's the capacity information, here's the complexity request. I need to hire someone. But without that information coming from the ticketing system, for example, I wouldn't be able to make that request. I could say, well, yeah, the team's really feeling overwhelmed, but it's kind of like Ashlyn said, it's the finger in the air. And it doesn't really work that way when you're going to your finance team and you're going to, HR to ask for these, headcount requests.
Definitely. I want to drill down a little bit, Ashley, on what you said about like potentially seasonality of an influx of requests. And I know, Ashlyn, your team has worked really hard to ensure that there's coverage for, times that there's like a higher velocity of, requests or tasks, especially like near the holidays or summertime. So, Ashlyn, would you mind talking a little bit more about like kind of that forecasting the team bandwidth based on metrics?
Yeah, so I think for lots of in-house legal teams, particularly, tech, there is a seasonality to the level of transactional volume that you're going to see coming through your legal team's front door. We generally see, big influxes towards end of year or some other peak times. But what has not always been readily visible to me is like, at what point does that start? And so we spent, quite a bit of time in, August through September analyzing what our end of year trends were from October to December, looking at week by week. Where did we see the highest volume? And it wasn't necessarily what we thought, right? We found that there were peak volume times that were earlier than we anticipated, or maybe even later than we anticipated. And through that, we were able to build a really strong coverage plan that we were presenting to the chief sales officer to have a discussion around like, hey, here's the support that we're planning to have through this end of year time period. Here are the days when we're going to be available. Here's where we might not, because it's holiday. And really having that data to drive that conversation shifted the narrative and, helped us make sure that we could meet the business needs without burning out at what is a busy time of year for many.
Definitely. I think that kind of goes into our next tip, which is helping enable the business. So you just mentioned that you work, cross-functionally, Ashlyn, to ensure that everybody's like enabled on what legal can actually do during specific times. Do you have certain ways that you either automate this or certain things that you encourage the team to do in those times?
Yeah, I think that in my career, I've done varying things over the years, whether that's enabling self-serve of reviews up to a certain dollar threshold, and maybe you shift it up a little bit at a peak volume time based on some analysis and risk considerations that your organization might have. It could be in anticipation of that rush, you create business checklists and really focus the team in on what they're submitting to. I find that a lot of legal teams get pretty bogged down with that back and forth. On the vendor side is a great example where something might come over to you and it's ready to sign, but you're like, oh, they spelled our entity name wrong, our address is wrong, they have the wrong contact information. If you can empower your team to vet that before it hits your desk, if you're saving time and you can just approve it, it's ready to go from the legal side. You don't have to have a second set of eyes. And when you're at a peak volume time, minutes count, and it really does start to snowball down if you don't take the initiative to really empower folks to run with it before it's in your queue.
Yeah. Ashley, I know when we were preparing for this webinar too, you kind of mentioned that it's important to meet them where they are, and there's like an educational component that comes with that. Can you speak a little bit more about how the education piece kind of falls into what Ashlyn was just speaking about?
So you can't expect them to do something if they don't know, or if they only halfway know. And so I can't stress enough the education and communication. If you're expecting them to go grab a checklist or go get a form, like a power form, for example, as a starting point, let's just say an NDA, or if for our sales team, if they live in Salesforce, well, if they're having to go outside of Salesforce to grab other things or go get educated, the chances of anyone doing that, if they're doing multiple clicks, is pretty slim. So meeting people where they are in the systems that they're in and making that material available, and making it very clear where they need to go and how they need to get it, will not only save them time, but it will also, going into the third tip, not to jump ahead, will save our legal team time, when they're actually getting to do the work, when it comes down to it.
Before we move on, we did have a question come in about what tools you actually use in order to enable the team. So is there anything there that the two of you would like to add in terms of the tools that are put in place technology wise?
Yeah, I think that just to start, I think it's going to be organization dependent. And what I mean by that is each organization has very specific ways that they like to operate and communicate with each other. You're, potentially in an organization that is very Confluence or Wiki heavy. And in those instances, building out a legal page that has tips and tricks that folks can drill down on, even to maybe get some pre-approved legal talk tracks for your sales operating system would maybe be the right fit. Or if you have a sales team, picking on the customer lifecycle sales side of the house to start, that is operating in another third party vendor solution, maybe you want to empower it in the way that their revenue operations or go to market teams are sharing information and insights with them. So it's really going to depend on who you're talking to, from an organization dependent perspective. But I really think that there's nothing that is too small to do from an enablement. I'm not afraid to just ping people, find out who my heavy hitter requesters are on the vendor side, and just send out an email and say, "Hey, we've made a change. Here's the note. If you have anyone else on your team who you think needs to know, or leadership, depending on your organization, really get creative and follow up routinely."
Definitely.
I would second that. I think communicating early, often, and through multiple channels, and it is organization dependent, whether it's Slack, email, third party platforms. For example, with our sales team, there's a platform that they have for training and education. putting the materials there is a smart move because it encourages enablement.
Absolutely. So we've talked about enabling the business. What about enabling your own legal team? How do you scale your legal team? This would probably be a great time for all of us to talk about how you really build out those processes internally with your own team in order to make everything a little bit more streamlined. Um, Either one of you, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I would say more recently, we have taken a look at our contracting processes to find areas of opportunity, not only for ourselves to be more efficient, but for our business stakeholders to be enabled. And that does include, creating additional playbooks or updating the playbooks that we already had in place, taking a look at our thresholds and really making a conscientious decision to say, should we be touching this at this level? No. Okay. What can we change in our process to make it easier for our team? Are we asking the right questions? That's another activity we're going through. Are we asking the right questions in our help desk? Taking a really good look at those questions. Are we getting the information we need so that our team can go and get all of the work done that they need to do without going in that back and forth cycle with the business requester?
Ashlyn, what about you?
Yeah, I think that there's always so much opportunity to think about where those building blocks are going to best fit. And an area that I personally really like to start is thinking about the roles that I likely will need to fill first or next, maybe is the better way to say it. And if that is the place to start from a playbooking and process documentation perspective. And so, for example, when we hired a commercial counsel on our team last year, I created an onboarding playbook and slowly started to fill in the gaps of information for each aspect of that individual's roles and responsibility. And so in the event we ever were to add another person that was doing similar work, I'm starting to create that consistency and support that playbooking. It's often internal in-house teams are focusing on the contracting space first. That's it's a natural place to go. But it could even be as simple as like how to document your vacations, how to plan vacation on your legal team, make sure you have coverage. And those are the building blocks that I think you can do that are quick and easy sometimes to address, create some consistency early so you're not at a point where you're at, 50 to 100 people, having started at 3 and kind of falling down on some of these very foundational activities that, other departments start to button up pretty early.
We did have another question come in, kind of around prioritizing your work. Are there best practices for those sorts of things, Ashlyn, that you were just talking about in order to prioritize better?
Yeah, so for me, from a prioritization perspective, I kind of like to think of things as, the must-dos, the nice-to-dos, the I would like to do, but maybe another time. Like it's not on
Mhm.
my to-do list now. And I really focus in on those must-dos. Those are going to be aligned to the company's objectives and goals. They're going to be aligned to the business objectives. They're going to be very focused on where we're maybe feeling the most friction in either our department or cross-functionally if we're getting feedback. But that doesn't
Mhm.
mean I'm not going to pull things from either of the buckets and say like, hey team, I'd like to start to track updates we'd like to make to our terms in this Google sheet. Takes me 5 minutes to start to do that, and now we have a process. Maybe that wasn't on something that was my priority to do, but where it's quick and easy, just kind of tackling those as they come, I think can help feel like you're moving um, faster.
Awesome. Ashley, anything from you?
I would second that. I think going back to what I first said on does this align to our department OKRs? Does this align to the overall business objectives? Is this going to drive revenue in some way or time save, efficiency gains? And then, yeah, much like Ashlyn, I've got my must do's, I've got my nice to do's, and then I've got the things that, man, I would really love to get to this. And yeah, I'll pull from all different directions. It just depends. But to Ashlyn's point, if it's something simple like, hey, we need to document these agreement types, it's a Google sheet. Get everybody involved, and and it's quick and easy. And then now you have a process.
Mhm. Absolutely. I know we're nearing time, and I know we promised 3 tips, but we actually have a bonus tip here about how our legal operations professionals use AI. Um, Ashley, is there any way that you use AI that you would encourage everyone to also do? Just something that makes your life easier.
I use it for summarizing meeting notes. It's fantastic for that. I use it to, if I'm not feeling very creative, help me draft communications. It's also very wonderful for that. I'm also exploring other ways to incorporate AI into our workflow, just from a like a quick and easy, like take a look at this document and give me a review of it and where are our best positions, for example. But I think just being willing to embrace it, it will make you faster. I have cut down my communications, like the time that I spend on emails is and going back and sending out meeting notes is tremendously been cut down.
Hmm. Absolutely. Ashlyn, what about you? How do you use AI?
Yeah, so I think all of the examples Ashley gave are fantastic. Obviously, working for a artificial intelligence powered legal technology provider, it is at the core of our focus from a legal team's perspective. And so we do use our own product, and I've been really loving having the opportunity to drill into some of the generative AI features that have been recently released, particularly in the contracting space, whether that's for redrafting or getting suggested edits for contracts that we're working on, or really just getting summaries of what's come in the door. I've really loved having the opportunity to dive into that and use it to optimize the way that we're operating. I just want to echo what Ashley said. Like, AI
Mhm.
is an optimization tool. It is going to enable your teams to operate at a higher level, maybe take on more complex work, have more opportunities to grow. And I don't view it as a replacement in any way. And I think it's something that we should be embracing and excited about.
It's your virtual teammate.
I love that. That's a great note. Awesome. So, like I said, we're getting close to the end here. I want to thank everybody for joining. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to webinars@linksquares.com. We can answer any questions from there as well. I do have one final question for our panelists. What's the one thing that everybody should walk away with today and start implementing ASAP? We'll start with you, Ashley.
Embrace change. It's scary, I know, but the more we embrace it, the more we are ahead as a department, as a team. Also, I think just being okay with things not being perfect. It's none of us are experts, and especially when it comes to AI, we're all figuring this out together. And so, um, the pursuit of perfection, hinders progress. And so, I think it's okay to not be perfect.
Awesome. Ashlyn, what about you?
I would say my piece of advice would be to seek to understand. I think that to really be able to best support your business partners, your legal team peers, or teammates is really to understand what the objectives they're trying to achieve are. It will shift the way you kind of frame the discussion if you know what the intended outcome or purpose is, or what they're aligned towards.
Mhm.
And I think the second thing I would say is provide transparency. You know, make sure that you are communicating and relaying why you've made a recommended suggestion, why, maybe you need to push back on a requested edit in a contract negotiation, or why you're not prioritizing that legal ops initiative. Empowering your team to give the why behind things, I think, really provides a deeper level of trust with your department.
And beyond, I think, Ashlyn. I mean, you always
Yeah.
help our marketing team, so I would say, that goes both ways too, or cross functionally. So that's something I know everybody in the business appreciates. So thank you both again, and thank you all for joining. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we will respond. With that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.